Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, for a lot of people, was one of their most highly anticipated movies, especially coming off last year when Tom Cruise put out Top Gun Maverick and shocked the world. And for a lot of people, including Steven Spielberg, they think it saved Hollywood's ass with $1.5 billion worldwide. So the expectations were very high for Mission Impossible 7, especially because this movie, which was made in the middle of COVID, Tom Cruise famously had a big blow up on the set because of the COVID protocols. With a $290+ million budget, it needs to do big things at the box office. We're talking about $900 million globally in order to break even. So how would it do opening weekend? Well, there's some good news and there's some disappointing news when it comes to Mission Impossible. Box office, Mission Impossible 7 falls short of expectations with $56 million debut, collects $80 million over 5 days. Now, it was projected over the 5-day open to do between $90 and $100 million. People did expect it to do over $60 million on the 3-day. That would have been a record for the franchise, and unfortunately, it fell short. I saw this movie. I love this movie. I think it's incredible, and I do think it'll have very, very good legs. But there's no denying with a movie with this kind of budget, with the kind of competition that's coming directly next week, like Oppenheimer and Barbie, it needs to do big things at the box office, or else it will be a financial failure for Tom Cruise and for the Mission Impossible franchise. And although it is disappointing domestically, there's no doubt, internationally, there is some positive news because internationally, it's doing big things. A $235 million global opening, that is a very big deal when it comes to a Mission Impossible movie. Because if you look and compare to other things that have come out recently, you look at Mission Impossible Fallout, what did it do? $156 million global opening. A little bit higher domestically, but that international number was nowhere near what we're seeing right now from Dead Reckoning Part 1. To be fair, it did have a few extra days because this did open a day earlier than normal. So you have to put that in perspective as well. But right now, Mission Impossible Fallout ended up at nearly $800 million worldwide with a very big international box office audience. Right now, globally, from a global perspective, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is doing very, very well compared to that, just not domestically. And historically, when you look at the Mission Impossible franchise, look at the splits for these things. When you look at, say, Fallout, $220 million domestic, almost $600 million internationally. Rogue Nation, $200 million domestic, and almost $500 million international. It's a big international audience for these movies. So that type of split is kind of expected. When you look at the global opening number, that $235 million, compared to something like Top Gun Maverick. Now, we saw Top Gun Maverick have a massive domestic market. Look at that, $700 million domestically. That is crazy. It's one of the biggest domestic runs we've ever seen in history. What did it do globally? Its opening weekend, $248 million global opening. Now, because of the way it opened, again, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 had an extra day on it, so you got to factor that in. Overall, it's tough to tell what this means for Mission Impossible. Certainly, undeniable, for something that was expected to start at around $90 to $100 million domestically. It didn't do that. It fell short of its expectations. Now, there's great word of mouth surrounding this movie. Mission Impossible movies, Tom Cruise movies in general, have very, very good legs. But considering this is something that needs to get to $900 million just to break even, people are very worried about what this might mean for this movie as a whole. Will it be able to get there? Will it have the legs with a lot of other competition coming this summer? That's yet to be determined. No doubt that they were hoping for something bigger. No doubt that a lot of people that love this movie were expecting something bigger. But when you put it all together, despite the slightly disappointing opening, it's still a 5-day domestic record for the franchise. It's still a worldwide global opening record for the franchise at $235 million. It's doing really well internationally. Right now, tracking ahead of where Mission Impossible Fallout was that made $800 million worldwide. So certainly there's some good and there's some bad when it comes to Mission Impossible. Overall, it's all going to depend on the legs. And Tom Cruise movies, especially ones that have A cinema scores like this, that have really good word of mouth, they typically have very long legs. We'll see what happens for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.